Hello everyone, the NASA here with ActionVFX. In this After Effects tutorial, we will learn how to conjure a magical weapon like in Doctor Strange. This tutorial will focus on compositing the sword and how to make it materialize using several ActionVFX Sparks elements. You can check out in the description below for the list of asset collections I used in this tutorial. This video will not be the only Doctor Strange tutorial on this channel. We will have another one coming out next week, so don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you will be notified when that one comes out. And now, without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so first we want to prep the elements that we need. So here I have this composition, and inside it is these two layers. First is a pre-comp of a plate of me in front of a green screen that I have Luma matte using this matte that I created. And then I also have color corrected this to match with the background that I have here. Another thing that I need is a 2D image of a blade or a sword. You can basically use any 2D image of a sword or weapon to do this. For me, I have this one that I rendered out from this 3D model I found on CGtrader. I also have flipped the top part of the blade and added some scratches and smudge textures from our Surface Imperfection collection. Okay, so now the main thing we want is to have the sword to stick to my hand. So what I have done is I did some planar tracking of my plate in Mocha. I created a shape of the front part of my hand and tracked its movement. We will then use this movement to stick our sword to the hand and the shape as a mask to make the sword look like it is being held by my hand. Okay, so now let's start compositing the sword. First, let's create a null and name it hand track null. And then we're gonna go to our plate, and then on the Mocha, let's create track data. And then set it to our null tracker. And then apply. Next, we're gonna move our sword here to my hand. And then we are going to parent it to the tracking null. Awesome. Next, we're going to duplicate our plate pre-comp here and name it hand mask. And then on Mocha, we're gonna create AE mask. And here we have the mask that we created in Mocha. Let's make sure this mask layer is on top of our sword. And then on the sword, let's change the track matte to alpha inverted towards the mask. And this is what we have. Next, let's finally do the effects on the sword. Okay, so what we want to have is for the sword to start appearing when my hand is swinging at the beginning. So let's select our sword here and we want to pre-compose it. Default attributes. Let's go inside the pre-comp and we are going to create a mask and we want to draw it around the sword. And then what we want is to animate the mask to make it look like the sword is materializing out of thin air. And then we want to feather the mask and then trim the beginning. Now let's go back to our main composition and this is what we have. Next, we're going to create a glowing effects, and to do that, we need to duplicate our sword. So let's select our sword, tracker null, and the matte. And then Ctrl D to duplicate them, and then move them to the top. So now we have these two groups of sword. Make sure that each sword layer is parented to its own null, and then we want to pre-compose the bottom group and name it opaque sword. And then we want to pre-compose the duplicate group and name it glowing sword. Now let's go inside our glowing sword pre-comp. First thing I want to do is to create an outline of our sword as a base for the glow. So let's pre-compose our sword again and rename it outline and leave all attributes. And then inside the pre-comp, we're gonna add fine edges to our sword. And then we want to click invert and set blend to 25. And then add Gaussian blur, set the blurriness to 3. And then we want to add tint. And for the white color, we want to set it to yellow. And then let's get curve and darken the black levels a little bit. Perfect. Then we are going to create a new solid and we're going to add fractal noise to that solid. And then we want to set the fractal type to smeary, noise type to spline. We're going to invert it, set the contrast to 300, brightness to -75, set the transform scale to 10. And then the evolution, we're going to alt-click and add an expression time times 200. And then we are going to add curves to brighten it a bit. And then we're going to add fast box blur and set the radius to 4. And then we want to Luma matte our sword outline to it. And this is what we have. Basically, we have this noisy outline of the sword. Now let's go back to our composition. And on our glowing pre-comp, let's change the blend mode to additive. And now we have this outline covering our opaque sword behind it. Next, let's add some glow to our glowing sword pre-comp. And then we want to set the threshold to 36, the radius to 11, and glow intensity to 0.6. And then we want to add another glow, and we are going to set this one threshold to 3, radius to 360, and intensity to 0.3. And then on the opaque sword, let's lower the opacity to 80%. And then add curves and darken it a bit. And this is what we have. Next, we're going to add some sparks that accompanies the sword as it appears. So first, let's copy the hand track null and paste it back into the main comp. For the sparks, I want to create some sort of trail as my hand is swinging. So I want to grab this single burst white from our grinding sparks collection, and let's make this go faster. So right click here, and let's bring our time stretch panel and then speed it up to 75%. And then let's position the sparks to come out of the sword and then parent it to the null. And then we want to find a time when the spark is about to finish, because we want this spark to disappear as the sword is fully formed. And then we want to trim our spark here. Next, we're going to create a mask to basically get rid of the front and the bottom part of the spark footage. And then we're going to animate it. Okay, next I want to add this spark burst high angle from our spark burst collection, and then we want to speed it up to 75%. This spark is to simulate an explosion of energy. And then I want to trim out the bright beginning because we just need the part where the spark is already dispersing. And then I'm going to add a couple of these single spark bursts from our electrical sparks collection. And lastly, I want to add a spark hit from the side, and I want it to point away from the direction of the hand swing. And I'm going to mask out the bright hotspot area because we don't want to add too much bright white blob in this effects. Okay, so I have added some more sparks. Now, something that you notice, many of the sparks are not actually parented to the null, because when the tiny spark burst come out, it should not get carried away by the movement of the hand. So we have our burst of spark as the sword is appearing. Now I want to have a little bit of residual sparks that stays with the sword. Let's bring this low volume fire sparks, and we want to just move it to on top of the sword's blade to make it look like it's emitting around it. And let's mask out the bottom part so we have a softer edge, and then parent it to the null. And then let's pre-compose our sparks and the null together and set this to add. So currently our sparks look very obviously from different elements lumped together because they all have different hue of color. One is a bit more yellow, one is a bit more red. So we want to generalize all the colors here by just adding a tint to this pre-comp. And then we are going to add curve and try add our own color. Let's make this a little bit yellow. And then we're going to add glow, set the threshold to 15, radius to 400, intensity to 0.5, and then glow operation to screen. And then the glow colors to A and B colors, and we want to set the color A to something like yellowish orange, and then the color B to orange. And then we want to duplicate it and set the radius to 600. And then we want to add another glow and set the threshold to 90, radius to 80, intensity to 0.2, and then add camera lens blur and set the blur radius to 2. Perfect. Next, we're going to add some light interaction onto myself here. So to do that, what we're going to do is to just create an adjustment layer and put it below all the effects but above the plate. And then let's add some curves and brighten it up a bit. And we want to make the color a little bit more yellow. Now, we want this adjustment layer to only affect our plate here. So let's duplicate the plate, and we're going to use that as an alpha matte for the adjustment layer. Next, we want to create masks around the areas that will receive light from the sword and the spark, like the shoulder here and this front part of my jacket. And then we want to animate them to follow the size of the spark and the sword. My idea is the light on the shoulder is more constant because it is the one that is casted by the sword itself, and the one on the front of my jacket is catching light from the sparks only. So to simulate these two different light intensity, we want to animate the opacity of each masks individually. Basically, we want this light interaction to have a bit lower opacity in its constant state, but when the spark bursts appear, we want to set it to 100%. And then let's trim the beginning of the adjustment layer. The last thing we want to do is to create a motion blur on the sparks and the sword. For the sword, it's rather simple. Just go to each layer of the sword pre-comp and turn on the motion blur. And then for the sparks, I want to add Real Smart Motion Blur plugin or RSMB plugin. If you don't have RSMB, you can use Pixel Motion Blur or CC Force Motion Blur. And also, we want to make sure to put the motion blur before the glow effects. And that was the tutorial for creating the Doctor Strange weapon effects in Adobe After Effects. Of course, in my final shot, I added another sword for the other hand and also peppered the environment with a little bit of more atmosphere and lens flare using the elements from our collection. Once again, we will be having another Doctor Strange tutorial coming out next week, so hit the subscribe button so you will not miss out on that one. And don't forget to click the thumbs up button and like this video. That would really help us make more tutorials like this one. We will also be having a May sale later this month, so you don't want to miss out on that as well. And also, if you want to purchase the assets that I used in this tutorial, you can check out our website at ActionVFX.com. At ActionVFX, we provide high-quality VFX assets for your VFX needs. We have fire, explosions, energy, and many others. You can also sign up for our ActionVFX subscription starting at the low cost of $14.99 a month. This is the most affordable way to access our library, and you can cancel anytime, no contract. Thank you so much for watching. Let us know in the comment section below what kind of tutorials that you'd like to see next. And see you next time. Bye bye.